Every morning, we travel to work on the same train. Like the motor cars on the road or the post office round the corner, we take the railways for granted. Sitting there, we find it hard to believe that they were once a fascinating yet terrifying new invention that staggered the world of 100 years ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can beyond measure congratulate ourselves that under the sovereignty of our gracious Queen Victoria, God bless her indeed, ladies and gentlemen, now and always, that in this, our glorious 19th century, we have attained the very limit, the peak, the pinnacle, ladies and gentlemen, of human endeavor and progress. Take just one example. Thanks to the inventive ingenuity of Mr. Stevenson, we can now travel over land at the rate of 30 miles an hour. Think of it, ladies and gentlemen. 30 miles an hour.
It was something to sing about then, and sing they did.
Daddy's on the engine, don't be afraid. Daddy knows what he is doing,
said the little maid.
We'll soon be out of danger, don't you ever fear. Everyone is safe because my daddy's the engineer.
The engine driver is still the hero of our boyhood. We can't ride with him on the footplate, but we can collect engine numbers. And that makes us feel a part of the romantic atmosphere.
I work on the railways, and I can't say I always find it romantic. It depends what your job is, I suppose. I'd better tell you a bit about it, and then you can judge for yourselves. The minimum wage is £4 a week. But here in the local depot, you start at a little more than that. Engines come into the depot at the end of a run to get cleaned up ready for the next trip. As she waits her turn to be cleaned, you have to drop the ashes from the smoke box and clear out the embers from the firebox. The superheated tubes get all bunged up with soot, so they have to be cleared out too. We do this with compressed air or steam. In most places, we load coal into the tenders by machinery. It's a great improvement on the old-fashioned method, which used to make coaling one of the dirtiest jobs. A great number of men are employed in the local depot. Some start here and never leave it, for there's no end to the number and variety of the jobs. Boiler washers, firelighters, shed laborers, all sorts. The man who has to scrape the clinker from the inside of the firebox has a very unusual job. They only let you do this for 10 minutes at a time. Regulations won't allow any longer because of the heat and the lack of air. You'll find it's quite long enough. Here's the driver with his fireman. They've come to find out which train they're taking out and where she's bound. Engine number 5066. They've got an hour to get her ready. After changing into overalls, they go along to the stores.
3 oil bottles, please.
They're on a good train today. The trip is more than 140 miles. And on a long run, the driver gets an hour's overtime for every 15 miles over the 140.
Yes, thank you.
Engine number?
5066.
It's a long run for the fireman, too. He has to throw a ton of coal for every 50 miles of the journey. And that's something like work. Both the fireman and the driver have quite a bit to do before they ever get to the station. They'll be responsible for the lives of hundreds of people, so they must make sure that their engine is in perfect running order. This chap has been a fireman for 10 years. In about another year, he'll get promoted to driver. His name's been on the list for some time now. That's to make sure there's enough water in the boiler. On an engine like this, there may be as many as 90 points to oil. Most drivers do them in the same order, and everyone does it himself. It's too important to leave to anyone else. It's 35 years since the driver started as an engine cleaner. As long as your eyes stay all right, you can hold this job till you're 65. Now just give the sandbox a tap. You never know when the line might be greasy. A few more lumps to keep up the 200-pound pressure, and then they'll be ready to leave.
The driver's name, please.
Osborne, Novo.
You've got 14 on for 420 tons.
Right out.
That's the train, on the top line. The signalman in the terminus box watches her progress, so that he can tell when to pull the levers that bring the points and signals into operation. The different kind of signals and all the points and crossings are worked by electricity, and the men have to remember every one of them. Each area of the line has a control room like this one. It's the controller's headache to fit into the regular services, the goods trains from the factories, the special trains, and the trains that may be running late. You start in a booking or goods office when you're young, and then come in here as a learner. You can get anything up to £8 a week here, and a pension at the end. Though sometimes you envy the man who has only a small signal box to look after. The signalman works an 8-hour shift. It's a pleasant job, and you're pretty well your own boss. You start as a porter and learn all the rules. From a small box like this, you can get promoted to one of the big junction boxes, where you may earn £6 a week. Here you get about £4.10, but sometimes there's a cottage and a garden thrown in, with a rent of 6 shillings, which is quite a consideration. Many stations look well cared for, and it's a sure sign that the station master takes a pride in them. Of course, you can't walk straight into the job. You would have to do your time in the booking office first, or get experience of railway administration as a clerk in the different departments and general offices. As the company's representative, he has to know the secret of dealing tactfully with all sorts of people. He has to have at his fingertips a knowledge of timetables and of the facilities which the company can offer to the public. The station master has every opportunity to use his initiative, encouraging local industries to use the railways, for instance. This is to the benefit of both the industry and the company. A good deal of his time is taken up in the office with all kinds of administrative work. The signal boxes and maybe the stations nearby come under his supervision. As for promotion, well, the bigger the station you get to, the higher the pay. How often have you cursed the goods trains that have made you late? But on the railways, perishable goods get first priority. Here we handle several hundred tons of parcels every day, and modern equipment helps to make this possible. We still use horses for local deliveries, though. The men soon get to know how to separate and classify the different sorts of parcels according to their destination. At the end of the day, the loaded wagons are ready to go to the marshalling yards. The men in the marshalling yards get up to about £5 a week. The wagons are broken up by the shunters, so that as they go over the hump, they can be directed into the right bay by the man in the shunting box. When the wagon has got there, the shunter stops it and couples it onto the previous one. After 4 or 5 years at this job, you can get to be a guard on a goods train or a yard foreman. Trains aren't much use without lines to run on. So let's have a look at the chaps whose job it is to keep them in repair. Laying track is done when the line is least busy, mostly on Sundays. Every job has to be timed to a second. As soon as the old length is out, in goes the new, and there's no margin for overlap. If you like an open-air life, then you'd like a track layer's job. Once the track's down, the maintenance gang looks after it. On an average, there's a gang to every 2 miles. One of their main jobs is to keep it smooth, wedging it up with chips of granite till it's as level as a billiard table. The ganger has to inspect his length of track once every day. He started as a plate layer at the railway's minimum wage. If a train breaks a new record, A lot of the credit must go to the gangers who worked up a good, smooth track.
Clear for the down fast.
This chap used to be a porter. Now that he's a guard, he's in charge of the train. Most people think he only waves a flag and does this sort of thing. But his is a very responsible job. He has to look out for all signals and be familiar with a mass of rules and regulations so that he knows exactly what to do in the event of an emergency. Meanwhile, he sorts out letters, parcels, milk, and sometimes goats that eat their labels. To an ordinary member of the public, the life of a parcels clerk behind the counter must look a very easy one. All he ever seems to do is to weigh things on a scale and enter them in a book. But when he's hundreds of parcels to cope with every day, you can imagine just what sort of job it is. They all have to be weighed, priced and labeled, and he is responsible for seeing that each one is sent off. Most of the time, the parcels and luggage are for urgent delivery, and that doesn't help to make things any easier for him. This chap is a parcels porter. He used to be an ordinary porter, slamming train doors and keeping the station clean. But now he's got this job at £4.10 a week. He has to look after the parcels and see them onto the right train. Being a porter is a job with prospects. If you've got a clear head and a sense of responsibility, you can get to be a signalman, inspector, or maybe a station master. In the booking office, you can get as much as £7 a week. There are many facts you have to know, as well as all the things the public think you ought to know. This is where you start to become a station master or a controller. You have to keep track of all your tickets, checking and entering them in your books. It's an exacting job, but you can get a pension at the end of it. It's not always an easy life, working for the railways, but it's a worthwhile job because it's an important job. There's room for all sorts of brains and abilities, and there are plenty of opportunities for promotion. So much for the jobs that are typical. But all sorts of outside trades and professions play an important part too. The pay for them is the railway rate for the district, and there's a job for practically everyone in the planning and construction departments.
experiments are going on to discover ways of making rail transport quicker, cleaner, and more efficient. And even newer forms of power are being investigated. These improvements will introduce still more trades. It's hard work, but it's steady work, for the railways have always had a good record over unemployment. These are the facts. As for the romance, well, it's still there, if you want to look for it.
Come on, son, you've got enough us for today.
Well, what time is it?
Time you was getting home.
Oh, all right.
Yes, got that one.